So Lizzy, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But
No, thank you very much, Dr. Nick. Looking forward to the discussion.
thank you. Before we walk into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
So I'm a girl born and bred in Limpopo. So for those who know University of the North, that's the hood within which I grew up. I grew up in. So that's where I was born. Then I moved to Mokopane to do my matric. It was a boarding school. That's where I spent time. Then I moved to the City of Gold, Johannesburg. Going to Wits University to do my first year of studying. And since then, I've just been captured by the City of Gold.
And tell us, what was your dream career, Lizzy, when you grew up?
That's quite an interesting question. I think it was not a particular career. I wanted to be an entertainer.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an entertainer because I grew up in a household where my parents were always entertaining and hosting parties. And, when the guests will come, then, they'll ask you questions. And I mean, they would just be fascinated about, finding out more about us, engaging with us and all that stuff. And I would also see how my parents will go out of the way to, entertain and host them. And I thought, you know what, it looks like this is something that I would want to do. And I mean, I also grew up in the era of Brenda Fassie, who has done some of the unimaginable things, that even social media these days can even, get to. And I think those were the kind of things that were just fueling into my desire to just become an entertainer.
Right. And tell us, Lizzy, who inspired you in your early days?
So I think I preluded to it probably in my first answer, right? So I'm a product of academics. Both my mom and my father were quite were serious academics. So I would say the people who inspired me are Albert Marope Mogale and Theo Mojaji Mogale. You probably would not know who they are, but they are my parents. My parents used to love having intellectual discussions and engagement. Like my mom specialized in English, my dad was an economist, and every time they'll just find a way to intellectually challenge each other, to argue about matters. And my mom will be, if my dad is talking about economics and the concept that my mom doesn't understand, my mom will correct the English. And the other way around, like if my mom talks, my dad will just try and bring the economics concept to just confuse it. And how they managed to handle the engagements, the discussions, and the conversations, really got me to say, I want to be like them. Like literally, we had encyclopedias at home. There would be days where I would sit and just try and read through encyclopedias. I don't even know what I was reading. I don't think I even understood what it was about. But that's where I think my inspiration and my desire, came from. And listening to my parents' students, talking about them, talking about how they've impacted their lives, talking about how they've helped them to be where they are, really was an inspiration for me to say, I want to be like them. I want to impact people. I want to shape and change people's lives the way that my parents did, because both of them ultimately they were educators, right? My mom was a high school principal, my dad was a lecturer. So that's what I think really inspired me around where I am. And even some of the things that I do, I think come from my parents.
And Lizzy, today you're a global leader in financial services. Looking back over your career, would you say there was a turning point where things could have gone different?
Yeah. Dr. Nick, I'll say from your mouth to God's ears around being a global leader. That's one of my aspirations and something that I'm building towards. So I'm glad you spoke it into being and let it be that way. I think there is quite a lot. I mean, when I went to Wits, I studied BSc chemistry in the first few years. And when we were doing second year, we actually had a session around a day in the life of. So they were taking us through the day in the life of people who are chemists, people who work in labs and all that stuff. That was a turning point for me. Like the understanding the risk that comes with playing around with chemicals. You could accidentally create an explosion, seeing people who are going through rehabilitation because of the mistakes that they made and all that stuff. turned my life around, and I decided from that moment, I will not be a chemist. I will not work in a lab. I need to find an alternate way to pursue my career. And I actually, that same year, I went and took out stats and psychology because I was a pure kind of like, science student. So I took stats and psychology as a way to try and help me to buffer and say, how do I find, a way out of there? And that actually helped me because when I finished at Verts, my first job was at a research company. And the stats and the psychology is actually what helped me because I could understand statistical analysis and be able to to understand when we design research for people, how do you structure the questionnaires to be able to get the right responses that you have. And that was my entrance into what we call, the commerce world. And I spent quite a lot of time in that environment. And I think because I didn't have a BCom degree, I immediately registered with IMM, the Institute of Marketing Management, to try and, get an augmenting, skills for what I was doing. That was quite tough. It was at a time where we all started working with our friends. People are living life, they're enjoying life. I have studies, and by that time, I already had had my son Lerato. I was studying. I was a parent, and trying to balance all these things with life was really, really, really a tough time in my life. And I think that pushed me to know how to juggle and balance things. That helped me to actually understand, to say, you know what, my friends can afford to live the life that they have. They don't have the responsibilities that I have. I have a human being that I brought into this world that I need to take care of. So how I viewed life and the things that I did was quite different to, to my peers and what they did. And I think it built the resilience in me around life is not fair, take it, swallow the pill. Life is not fair. But when you're dealt a card, do your most to make the most of the cards that you were dealt. And I think that's what I did. And I was a bit stuck in my first job because I worked for almost 3 years with no promotion. And people around me were getting promoted and I was working hard. It was really a challenge. Then I decided to say, let me try and find another job. I went through multiple interviews. I struggled to actually find a job, and I was lucky. I landed a job in a risk consulting company. And Dr. Nick, I remember when I joined, the first day that I got to the office, my boss asked me to say, Lizzy, here's a spreadsheet that I'd like for you to analyze for me. Look at what you can pick up from the spreadsheet. On that same day, 2 of my colleagues were being flown to Nigeria to go do a project. And I said, and I'm like, how unlucky can I get? Again, my colleagues are going into different countries. I'm sitting and doing a spreadsheet. And I sat down, I analyzed that spreadsheet. Lo and behold, from that analysis of the spreadsheet, 2 weeks later, my boss came back and said, look, from the work that you did on the spreadsheet, we've just secured a project in Mauritius. We're going to spend 6 months in Mauritius to do a project for one of the biggest banks in Mauritius. And that was my breakthrough. And that was one of the things that I learned, to say, from what I looked down as a spreadsheet, actually became a defining moment in my career and, launched me into new things. So I've learned to say no task is too small. Always give your best to everything that you do, and you will see the result of it. And that is something that I've carried with me throughout my career as I continue.
Thank you, Lizzy. And tell us, what is driving you today?
That's a very good question. And one of the things that I actually realized is you need an anchor in your life. And for me, Christianity is the anchor in my life. It's something that drives me to say, there's a reason why God landed me in this earth. When he landed me, at the time that he landed me, there is something that I need to pursue. And every day, that's what I wake up to say, God, what do you want me to do? What have you brought me here to do? What is the difference that only I can make in this world, And I also borrowed a phrase that I use it as my life motto around: always leave things better than you found them. And that's what I keep pushing myself to be able to do, to say, in every situation or occasion that I encounter, I try to leave things, better than I found them. Sometimes you leave people bruised and all that stuff. And I would actually reflect a lot and challenge myself and start saying, what can I do a bit better? Did I leave that person feeling different? than they were before, before they met me. And the other thing is, I want to leave a legacy. I mean, there's a popular song by Beyonce that I kinda, I love, and I love listening to. The song that says, "I was here." It says, "I lived, I loved, I was here." I want to leave this world with no regret, knowing that I've done everything that I wanted to do. So when I have those down moments and all that stuff, I just play that song, and it just gets me into the mood to say, there is a reason why I'm in this world. And every day is my pursuit to try and figure out, why am I here, and what can I do with the gifts and resources that I've been given to be able to make a difference.
This is beautiful, and I hope you'll be able to preach it to the nation or to the world.
At least I've shared it with you and the people that get to talk to me and find out about my story.
Now, Lizzy, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
Whew, that's quite an interesting question. I think, for me, the future of leadership, right? I mean, lately I've been thinking a lot around, what do we talk by authentic leadership? And this was triggered by, you read a lot about people start saying, but someone in your office shouldn't be doing this. Someone like, I call them, social police, to say we have quite a lot of social police that that's all about boxing people. And I'm thinking, in this kind of world that we are moving into, in a world where we really want people to bring their authentic selves, is there such a thing to say, in this office, this is how you need to behave? Or should we allow people to bring their own self? Because each and every one of us get attracted to by different things. So if it looks like we're trying to create some uniformity or some, we're diluting the diversity in behavior, in approach of doing things, that I think the future leader need to start thinking differently, differently around. So this concept of, we need to disrupt our mental models, what we've always believed to be the way that things need to be done, the way that a leader needs to behave. I mean, I remember when I started working, a managing executive, like you feared them like this authority that's untouchable. Like even when you meet them, you felt like you can't even make eye contact. And that made them a bit too distant. We couldn't connect and relate to them. And the future leader is actually someone who will be able to connect with the people. We are moving into a world where people are looking for connection. People are looking for purpose. People are looking for, a better reason to want to be part of something. And I think as leaders, it's going to be quite incumbent to say, whether it's about how you sell your product, whether it's about offering a service, whether it's about running an NGO, whether it's about being a politician, it's going to be about people and connecting with people and being authentic to self, I believe, is what the future of of leadership is looking at. And also I think I'm always preaching this concept of curiosity. The future of leadership is those people who are quite curious about anything. Like, I don't think curiosity should be boxed. Just be curious about anything and everything that you come across, because in that process of curiosity, you're going to discover new things. You either discover new things about yourself, you discover new things about concepts, you discover new things about ideas, about products that actually spearhead and pushes you to be quite a differentiator in the space. And I would say probably the last thing around what defines the future of leadership is going to be around understanding mental wellness. I think as leaders, this mental wellness and mental health is going to become critically important. The frameworks and the models that used to define what a leader does, this whole balance and all that stuff, has actually destroyed a lot of life. Now, a lot of leaders are pausing and reflecting around, how do I maintain that mental wellness? Because it can be at all costs. It can be success at all costs. It has, you also don't want to miss out on life and regret. I'm the kind of person, every time I meet, some of the senior, leaders, I used to ask them to say, what got you here? What regrets do you have? And most of them, the common thing that they said is, I wish I lived my life then. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I invested time in seeing my children grow. I missed that first step, that first word, because I was busy working. If only I could turn back the hands of time, I would go back and do it differently. I think that's what's going to determine the future of leader, especially as we get, the young leaders into the system who are quite conscious about living a holistic life, not a life of subcomponents.
Thank you, Lizzy. And tell us, what have you learned from your own leadership journey that you consider most important for future leaders? In other words, what is it we have to do more to build future leaders, to empower future leaders?
Yeah, I think, for me, one of the things I learned, I think I reflected on it a bit earlier, right? To say no task is ever too small. That becomes important. I mean, at a young age, I found myself in boardrooms of executives where I'm either taking minutes, where I'm either a program manager and I'm sitting with people who are like 4 or 5 levels, above me. And one of the most great advices I ever got was a guy called Fortune Floro said to me, Lizzy, when you sit in this space, be a sponge, absorb as much information as you can. It might not make sense to you now, but in the future, it's going to benefit you. And I think that advice helped me quite a lot, because I would sit and I would listen and I would learn. I would learn around how executives engage with each other. I would learn around, what are the things that are important? Who gets listened to? Why do I think they get listened to? And all that stuff. And sometimes I'll even throw in, a few thoughts of mine and see how they being reacted upon. Sometimes you just get dismissed. Sometimes you actually, they listen to you and they're like, great idea. And they take the idea. And I think that helped me to create the confidence of being around the boardroom to say, you know what, my voice matters. I just need to know when and how to voice it out. And this comes from the learnings that I had when I was sitting in those moments, listening to those conversations. The other thing is manage your imposter syndrome. I think any leader that I've spoken to, there is a point in time in their life where they had an imposter syndrome. And it's not about, trying to diminish it, but it's around managing it, to say, when you really feel that you are not good enough, then push yourself to excel so that you become good enough. Don't let that derail you and, channel you into the negative thought, but use it as energy to say, you know what, I'm not good enough. Let me work as hard as I can so that I can excel. Because one thing that I've learned in my career is that hard work has never been wasted. One way or another, you always get the return on investment in hard work. And I like, going by the to say, I work like I've never prayed. And I pray like I've never worked hard. And the combination of those two helps me to actually, push and go ahead. And the last thing, Dr. Nick, that I can share around what I learned is curiosity and asking questions. I think what got me to where I am is my level of curiosity, and that got instilled by those meetings I used to sit in with senior people. I try to be curious about things. I try, I try to put myself in situations where I feel uncomfortable and learn to say, how do I deal with instances where I'm uncomfortable, and how do I strengthen and enhance that muscle of being in an uncomfortable situation? I travel a lot. I go to new places. I explore around new places, because travel sometimes strips away the level of comfort of what you have. You step into the unknown, and that helps me to start saying, how do I learn new things into this space? How do I navigate my space around areas where people don't even speak English, and you need to find your way of getting around? Those kind of things, they even get you to be curious around, how do I talk? I mean, there were instances where I'll do sign languages, trying to find a way to get somewhere. I would do sign language. And interesting enough, people got to understand what I was saying. So I would say, this aspect of curiosity and listening actively is something that I've learned on my journey that I would encourage people to do. And one last nugget, never go to a meeting or a session without preparing at least one question to ask. To say, any meeting that you get invited to, any event that you go to, at least try and prepare one question that you need to ask and challenge yourself. Get out of that comfort zone and raise your hand, your heart beating very hard, your voice shaking. Ask that question, because that practice gets you to get more and more comfortable. And the more you do it, the more you become comfortable in that space, and the more you actually learn a lot, to realize that the question that you've asked has actually helped other people in the room. The question that you asked made you, stand out, differentiated you, made you get noticed. For example, if you're looking for a mentor and you go to a talk that they are having, ask them a question that gets them to pause and to think about you and to remember you, so that afterwards, when you go and say, would you be my mentor, they can at least have a data point to work with, because they've recognized you from that perspective. So I hope that gives you a bit of a good sense around what I've learned from my journey, that I believe, is important to build future leaders.
Thank you, Lizzy. Now, you mentioned mentoring, and as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Nick. It's this thing of mentoring, then you get those purists who say, is it coaching? Is it mentoring? What exactly is it? So I'll just talk about it in generic terms, not in its purest form. So a few years ago, I used to run what I called new leaders apprentice, and I would partner with institutions, and then I partnered with CEDA, which was an institution that was helping underprivileged students with advancing their careers from a tertiary perspective. So I was invited there to speak, and as I was speaking there, I just spoke to them about the idea to say, it's take your learning upon yourself, find platforms where you can learn, where you can apply your skills. And they actually asked me to say, how can I help them? And that's how we created the apprentice program. And I was mind blown by what those young minds came up with, because we'll run it as a 6-week program. Every week we give them a new task, and I would bring in my friends from industry, my colleagues from industry, to be on the panel of judges. We move from a team of 30 up until we get the ultimate winner. We get them to work as a team, to say you can work as a team and compete with one another. And there are a few of them now who are leaders in corporates. Unfortunately, I didn't check with them to say, can I mention their names? So I'm quite wary, right, from a popular perspective, that I can't mention them. But some of them are actually executives in boardrooms and in organizations. And every time they would call me and say, guess what? That presentation that I did, and the judges, hammered me. The judges, gave me the feedback. It came into fruition today. I found myself walking into a boardroom feeling confident because of the learnings that I got from that age where I had nothing to lose. So that's what actually, leaves me feeling fulfilled, that I could impact the youth and shape, some of the youth who are now, seasoned executives in boardrooms, who are actually doing bigger things than I can even think of doing.
And Lizzy, looking back over your leadership career and maybe your learning career, are there any role models of leadership that you came across and that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
To say the role models is people that you are attracted to, that you are drawn to. So I always try and shy away from giving names, but saying to people, to say, for example, if you love music and there's a particular artist that you listen to a lot, just pause and ask yourself, say, why do I like this artist a lot? Is it their lyrics that I read? Is it their beats that I like? Is it what they do outside their music career that I like? Because those are some of the things that actually gets one to find great role models. I always find that I'm attracted to people who challenge status quo, people who try to find new ways of doing things. I mean, someone that I follow quite closely is Peter Diamandis, from Singularity and 360 Abundance. And I learned quite a lot around the concepts that he talks about. Some of them I struggle with them. Some of them I'm like, no, you can't incubate babies and all. But those things get me to challenge what my thinking ability, get me to really push myself to imagine that world, to ask myself, if I were living in that world, what will that mean for me? How do I need to shape and challenge myself to be able to, to live in that world? I always say to people, watching movies. I mean, I'm an F1 fan. And I like F1. I like more reality shows where there's high stress and people need to perform, because that's a skill that I'm trying to hone in. So I would be more drawn to things like those, like in F1, just looking at a driver having to drive at that high speed. They have to focus, they need to listen, they need to do all this kind of things, and they are competing. So those things to me, I mean, sometimes I feel their stress after a race. I feel like, I'm so tired. I was absorbing the stress, but it's helping me to stretch my muscle of dealing with stress and, thinking clearly with clarity, being observant of what's happening around you, the team play, connecting with the team in the paddock, understanding what you need to do, relying on the team when you go, for tire changes. And I would say I personally learn from them. And I would encourage people to say, try and learn from things that encourage you, things that you are automatically drawn to.
Thank you, Lizzy. And tell us, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
I would say, I mean, I am on LinkedIn, although I had taken a bit of a break from LinkedIn, but I share most of my thoughts, on LinkedIn around, things that I randomly think about, the work that I do that I believe has impact, to others. I would reshare content that I believe, it's good things that people need to know. So I would say on LinkedIn, under Lizzy Mogale, and it's quite interesting. There's another, lady in South Africa who's Lizzy Mogale. So you'd have to look for Lizzy Mogale at Nedbank, to be able to find me. So those will be the spaces. Otherwise, just go to Google and see what you find when you Google.
Right. And last but not least, Lizzy, what is your advice to the millions of learners who are looking to enter the world of work, who are looking to start a career? What is maybe a word of advice or two that they should consider when starting their career?
I would say, I know it will not make sense now, but to be honest, it's not about the amount of money you can make. It is about how inclusive you can become. To say in the beginning, it may feel like a challenge, but if you learn to drive solutions that are inclusive, to develop concepts that are inclusive, that has a higher return on investment than just chasing money around. This is the amount of money that I've made in an organization. Learn and learn, relearn. Learn and learn, relearn. Every time there's a new concept. I mean, now we are in a world, we're talking about Web 3.0, we're talking about metaverse, we're talking about, ESG. Always try and learn the concepts that are happening around you and push yourself to understand them and ask yourself, how can you apply them into your day-to-day job? Because that's how you become relevant. Challenge yourself to be better than you were yesterday. Compete with yourself. Keep pushing yourself. Challenge yourself to be different, to be better than you were yesterday, because that's how you start, making progress and making a difference. Learn to connect the dots around concepts. If you look at some of the innovations that have been brought onto the table, is people connecting dots, connecting concepts that did not seem related, but when they get brought together, they either bring new insights, they bring new idea, or they bring some inspiration, some new innovation that helps you to get somewhere. I've already spoken about be curious, disrupt you. Keep disrupting yourself. Keep disrupting yourself and asking yourself to say, am I the same person that I was yesterday? How do I disrupt myself? How do I disrupt, even going to work? Don't use the same route every day when you go to work, even if you follow ways. Try and use a different use. Try and around your life, try and bring aspects and elements that gets you to experience different things, because we all learn from different experiences, and diversity is the tool that will set aside, future leaders who are performing, who are excelling, to ordinary leaders. So that's what I would leave people with, to say, try and drive inclusivity, learn and learn, relearn. disrupt you, learn to connect the dots, and create situations of discomfort where you can learn from those levels of discomfort.
Well, Lizzy, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership. And I hope one day you will package these nuggets into a book.
Let's hope so too, Dr. Nick. Thank you so much for being curious about my story, for wanting to actively listen to my story. I really appreciate it, and I hope something in what I said was valuable to you and the people who will listen to this piece of work. I've reflected quite a lot as I was speaking on some of the things that I need to also challenge and push myself around to become a better leader.